Don't know if you noticed, but Mario's everywhere, and when you're as big as Mario, you're bound to have a spin-off or two, and oh boy did Mario get some spin-offs. Sports games, puzzle games, racing games, a goddamn MS Paint game. But we're not here to talk about any of that, nah. We're here to talk about the big one, Mario's RPG games. You see, back in the day, this was Mario. You run, you jump, you save the princess, if you're good, and that's the game. Yeah, sometimes you go golfing or whatever, but for the most part, this is all Mario was at the time. But then Nintendo got together with a company called Squaresoft and started work on a project that would completely defy what was expected from a Mario game. Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars. It's an RPG with Mario in it, and it was great. It had this amazing story with this cool sword guy that comes out of the sky and stabs Bowser's castle, and he's all like... The game looked beautiful, the characters were super memorable, and it was just the perfect blend of traditional RPG elements with the Mario universe. So yeah, Super Mario RPG was a big hit. So of course Nintendo immediately started planning for a sequel. Except there was a bit of a problem. Nintendo and Squaresoft weren't really on talking terms anymore. You see, it was this whole thing where Nintendo wanted to stick with cartridges instead of CDs for their next home console. Square wasn't having any of that, so they jumped ship over to the competition since they were using CDs and made a killing over there. With Squaresoft out of the picture, Nintendo was forced to find another studio to make the sequel. So they got together with their friends at Intelligent Systems and started work on Super Mario RPG 2. Except they didn't want to piss off Squaresoft more than they probably already did, so they decided to change the name to Mario Story, which would ultimately become Paper Mario when it was brought over to the West. Now, my experience with the Paper Mario series is weird. You see, I've only ever played through the quote-unquote bad ones. I know what you're thinking, but don't worry, I already got rid of it. If you know anything about Paper Mario, you'll know that the first two games are considered by many to be some of the greatest games of all time, while the rest are considered to be mediocre at best and a complete train wreck at their worst. Which is why I'm sometimes a bit hesitant to tell people that I actually remember enjoying these entries. Well, all of them except one at least. But that's just made me even more eager to try the rest of the series. I mean, if I was able to enjoy the bad Paper Mario games as much as I did, I can't even imagine how much I'd enjoy the actual good ones. So I think it's finally time. Let's go all the way back to the very first Paper Mario and see what I've been missing out on. Initially released in Japan in the year 2000 and a year later for the rest of the world, the original Paper Mario definitely stood out from the crowd. You see, it was all about cutting-edge 3D graphics back then. The 5th generation of consoles were very much defined by these iconic low-poly 3D models. So when you're used to games looking like this for an entire generation, then something comes along that uses 2D sprites instead of 3D models, well, it's definitely gonna turn some heads. For good reasons though. You see, while the sprites and level geometry are pretty low res by today's standards, there's no denying that this is one of the best looking games on the N64. The visual style isn't just for looks either, it also helps enhance one of the most important aspects of Paper Mario, its personality. This game is defined by its character interactions and witty dialogue. The art style enhances these components by allowing characters to be more expressive. While 3D models at the time were charming in their own right, they couldn't hold a candle to the expressiveness that could be achieved with a traditional 2D sprite. I mean, just imagine Bowser's big old mouth-breathing N64 model waltzing in trying to flirt with Peach. It just looked creepy and unsettling. Whereas with 2D sprites, they're able to make it seem a lot more playful and absurd. But anyways, with this being an RPG and all, there's obviously got to be some kind of story. So what does this game have in store for us? Well, Paper Mario starts with Bowser committing a goddamn felony by breaking into a place called Star Haven and stealing an item called the Star Rod.
You son of a bitch!
That's Kirby's thing! So we find out the Star Rod can apparently grant wishes and is guarded by a bunch of star spirits, but they're goddamn useless because, like I said, Bowser just kind of takes the thing, no problem at all. We then cut to the Mario household, where Luigi apparently doesn't matter because only Mario gets his name on the house, damn it. So they receive a letter from Princess Peach telling them she's throwing a party and both Mario and Luigi are invited. Also, the party's taking place right now. Thanks for the heads up, I guess. So we go to the party, mingle with some guests, and then Mario gets invited to Peach's private chambers. Yeah, you know what, it's whatever, just make yourself at home, I guess. So Bowser uses a Star Rod to kick our ass, he steals the castle with Peach in it, and we learn Mario needs to find the 7 star spirits or whatever to save the day. So yeah, it's your typical Mario plot of having to save the princess from the big bad old Bows, except this time we got some RPG plot MacGuffins to collect. On one hand, this is a pretty big disappointment, especially when you consider how much more unique the previous Mario RPG story was. But on the other hand, I don't feel like this game really needed much more in terms of plot. Every chapter has its own self-contained story with its own set of memorable characters and set pieces. You'll be saving a village of boos from a ghost-eating monster, helping an archaeologist find a lost treasure in a volcano, and even entering a toy box where a group of rogue Shy Guys hide out and steal stuff from people. While I would have enjoyed having a more interesting end goal to work towards, I found it ultimately didn't matter due to how enjoyable the actual journey to get to that end goal was. Now, with this being a turn-based RPG, the combat is obviously, well, turn-based. Super Mario RPG had one of the most unique battle systems of all time, and I was excited to see how Paper Mario improved upon it. My expectations were pretty high, too. The battle music was upbeat and exciting, and the stage play aesthetic was extremely charming. Everything was looking pretty promising. That is, until I actually started playing it.
That's it?
There was just no depth or strategy besides choosing between your hammer or jump attack. You just take turns smacking each other around until someone decides to fall over. Even when I got to the first real boss fight, it was the same exact thing, except now, uh-oh, it's a big Goomba this time. What am I supposed to do now? Jump on him a bunch of times till he falls over just like every other goddamn enemy you just fought. Honestly, I was almost ready to call it quits. I just wasn't having fun. Yeah, the dialogue was pretty funny at times, but if the gameplay isn't keeping me invested, well, then why should I care? But I decided to keep playing, and well, I am so glad I did, because everything changed once I got this item. The Lucky Star lets you use action commands, and this simple little addition turned one of the most boring battle systems I've ever experienced into one of the best. Instead of just pressing A and watching a canned animation play, you now have to time your button presses just as Mario hits an enemy in order to do the most amount of damage, and it's just so satisfying to pull off. Pretty much everything you do in a battle now has a unique action command tied to it. You'll hold the control stick in a specific direction to charge your hammer, press A at the exact moment an enemy attacks to defend, and tons more. This makes you feel so much more engaged in each battle, and turns Paper Mario into a game about skill rather than just pure strategy like most other turn-based games. Super Mario RPG also had a similar timed hit system, but Paper Mario just makes so many improvements to it by adding a lot more variety to the actions you'll need to do for each attack. I was amazed by how much of a difference this simple little addition made to the combat, which just got me thinking, why the hell weren't action commands unlocked from the start? I mean, the Super Mario RPG let you use them right away, so why not Paper Mario? Well, while playing through the game, you'll notice pretty quickly that Paper Mario's target demographic is not hardcore RPG fans, but instead people who are completely new to the genre. This game is the exact definition of baby's first RPG. It's a stupidly easy game, which isn't a bad thing, especially when you consider the demographic they were going for. You see, the RPGs kind of have this bad rep of being overly complicated and confusing for newcomers. Paper Mario is looking to avoid sharing that same reputation by making everything as simple and easy to digest as possible. So the only reason I can think of as to why action commands aren't unlocked from the start is they didn't want to risk overwhelming anyone with this mechanic. But really, are action commands that hard to understand? A better way to introduce them would have been to handle it exactly how Super Mario RPG did, where they're there from the start, but aren't explained right away. So basically, if you know about them, you can use them. But if not, it's like the mechanic doesn't even exist yet. You know, kind of like the saying of what you don't know can't hurt you, and action commands can't hurt you. I mean, just here, look, I'm fine. After each battle, though, you'll collect a certain number of star points, which is this game's version of experience points. Collect 100 and Mario will level up. However, leveling up doesn't work quite how you might think it would. Instead of getting random stat boosts and skills with each level up, you instead get to choose to upgrade one of three things: hit points, flower points, or badge points. Hit points obviously upgrades your HP and allows you to take more damage in battle. Flower points allow you to use special attacks, and badge points allow you to equip more badges. Badges are found everywhere in Paper Mario and are integral to the combat. You see, they're used to give Mario more abilities in battle. However, each badge costs a certain amount of badge points to equip, which means if you want to equip more badges, you'll need to upgrade your badge points. The cool thing about badges is they allow you to customize Mario to fit your playstyle. Want to play more offensively? Well, then equip badges like the Power Quake to give you more offensive options. Having trouble dodging some enemies' attacks? Equip the Dodge Master badge to make the timing a little less strict. Not only does this add a ton of depth to the game, but it also helps make Paper Mario even more accessible by allowing players to choose how they want to play. Now, because the leveling system is so different compared to other RPGs, Paper Mario turns out to be a lot more of a controlled experience. You see, the developers always know exactly how strong Mario will be at any point in the game. They're always fucking watching.
I'm here.
This is because Mario's main stats are directly tied to your progress in the story. For example, you can only raise your attack after finding a certain badge or upgrade, and these are only available at specific points in the game. So once you find those upgrades, the developers know they should probably turn up the difficulty a bit to compensate. It gives this game a really nice difficulty curve that gives you a much more relaxed experience while also keeping you engaged. In any other RPG, you have the option to grind to make your character stronger, which means if you grind a lot, you could potentially become over-leveled and just blow through the game, which could get fairly boring after a while. Or if you don't grind at all, you might become under-leveled, which could lead to battles feeling unfair and frustrating. It's just extremely difficult to make sure the player is always balanced with the rest of the game. That's why I think Paper Mario's leveling system is such a clever design choice, since it guarantees the player will always be in that sweet spot where they're never too strong or too weak. Now, you can grind in Paper Mario, but you're only ever going to get more health, flower points, or badge points out of it. The only way to actually make Mario stronger is just by playing through the game. But enough about dumb old stats and stuff. I'm pretty sure I lost like half of you there with that big old info dump. So let's talk about something a bit more fun, like partners. In most chapters, you'll come across a character that'll join Mario on his adventure. These are called partners, and there's quite a few of them. You got Goombario, the Goomba who wants to be just like Mario when he grows up, Cooper, the adventure-loving Koopa, Bombette, the sassy Bomb, who's probably my favorite, Parakarry, the Paracoopa mailman who's known for losing the mail he needs to deliver. How the hell is this guy still his job? Bo, the affluent Boo, Watt, the adorable little Spark, Sushi, the motherly Cheep Cheep, and finally, Lester. This fucking nerd. If you couldn't already guess, they're basically Paper Mario's answer to party members, except just like everything else in this game, they're simplified a bit to be more beginner friendly. You can only have one out at a time and they can't level up like Mario can. Instead, you rank them up by finding a special block in the overworld which grants them a new skill to use in battle. They don't have HP either, instead they can only be knocked down temporarily. They're also not as strong as Mario is, but they each have specific enemies and situations that they're best suited for. While they're all charming and memorable in their own right, I feel like there was a lot of missed potential here. Outside of the chapters you first find them in, they just don't really do much besides following you around and occasionally talking for Mario since, you know, he apparently can't do that himself, I guess.
Hey, paisanos!
Partners can sometimes receive letters from other NPCs, which helps a little bit in fleshing them out, but I just always felt like they could have done so much more to expand these characters. Now, remember when I said the overarching story was nothing more than your typical Mario plot? Well, that's still true. But the way it all unfolds is anything but typical for a Mario game. In between each of the 8 chapters is a short section where you'll play as a captured Princess Peach, where you'll sneak around the castle trying to get clues on where the remaining plot MacGuffins are. Giving the player this alternate perspective is such a cool way to tell a story like this. It gives you insight on characters and motivations that you wouldn't otherwise get. It also makes the moment when you finally reach Peach's castle as Mario that much more thrilling. I especially love how the game builds up to this as well. You start in the peaceful Star Haven, which is accompanied by this relaxing, almost mystical sounding tune. You then break into enemy lines with this music that evokes a sense of danger before finally reaching Peach's castle, an area you're all too familiar with at this point, but something feels off. This place was once crawling with guards, but now it's completely empty with nothing but this foreboding music filling the air. It gives you this sense of fear and acts as a constant reminder that somewhere in this big empty castle, the very place where this whole adventure first began, Bowser is waiting. This finale is all set up perfectly in my opinion, with the tensions constantly rising as you make your way through it. It's just a shame that it all culminates to a fairly uninteresting encounter with Bowser, which leads into a second phase where he's just bigger. Yeah. But like I said before, this kind of stuff never really bothered me. Paper Mario is this huge adventure that, just like the mainline games, is more so about the journey rather than the ending. Super Mario RPG tried to be an RPG set within the Mario universe and completely nailed it. But while Paper Mario is technically its sequel, I don't think it's trying to accomplish that same goal. Instead, it's trying to be a Mario game first with RPG elements. There's just so much about this game that goes against what you'd expect from any other RPG. The partners, leveling system, difficulty, badges, none of it tried to fit the mold of what is expected from this genre. Instead, it tried to create its own mold and be something unique, something revolutionary, something that could only be described as truly Mario. Mario in an RPG. Like that would ever work, is what I would have said if this were the early 90s, but according to my calendar I bought and haven't changed since 2004, it is in fact the year 2004. Wait, what the fuck? Okay, so let's just pretend it's 2004, I guess. Now, at this point, the idea of Mario starring in a role-playing game is kind of old news. Basically, the whole wow factor of it is gone. I mean, we were originally introduced to the concept in 1996 with Super Mario RPG. Then we got a spiritual successor 4 years later with Paper Mario, and just recently, a completely new Mario RPG was released with Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga. era. That's like 3 completely different Mario role-playing games released within a span of 8 years, and apparently there's already another one on the way with a sequel to Paper Mario. What I'm trying to say is this is no longer Mario's first RPG rodeo. Seeing Mario star in a role-playing game just doesn't carry the same weight as it did back in 1996. We've seen this all before, so how the heck is a sequel to the original Paper Mario gonna stand out from all these other games? I mean, is there even much more they can do with this kind of formula? Oh, you bet your ass there is. Even though it was one of the last games Nintendo published on the N64, the original Paper Mario was an absolute hit. It took everything that RPGs were known for and gave it all a unique Mario twist. You see, instead of trying to adapt Mario into an RPG like Super Mario RPG did, Paper Mario attempted to do the opposite and adapt the RPG genre into a Mario game. They did this by stripping away what made a typical RPG so daunting for newcomers and focused on making it as beginner-friendly as possible. You know, kind of like how anyone can pick up a Mario platformer and have a good time. They wanted to do that same thing, except with RPGs. Yeah, this meant Paper Mario was extremely easy, but more importantly, it was just fun. Honestly, all Nintendo and Intelligent Systems had to do at this point was do what almost any sequel does and just iterate on what came before it. Add some new characters, chapters, maybe raise the difficulty a bit, and bam! The easy sequel that probably would have sold just as well as the original. But Intelligent Systems wasn't interested in doing a simple iteration, no. They wanted to completely surpass what came before it. Paper Mario 2 was announced at the Game Developers Conference in 2003 and looked to be, well, exactly what the title said it was, a sequel to Paper Mario. The reveal trailer was about a minute long and showed off pretty much everything you'd want to know about this game. There's apparently a big old dragon, new partners, new locations, Peach in a bathroom. Why? We also got a look at the updated art style, which apparently wasn't always a thing. Instead, early on in development, the game was meant to share the same art style as its predecessor, but eventually adapted this new style. This new style, I like it. A lot, actually. It keeps the simplicity of the original while also making everything look more clean and iconic. I'll always have a soft spot for how the first game looked, though. Like, he just looks so cute. I just want to squeeze him and... Oh god, I killed him. The game was then shown off at E3 2004 with a playable demo, then a few months later, it finally released with a name change as Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door. Surprisingly, they completely dropped the Mario Story branding that the Japanese version of the first game had, and instead chose to use the Paper Mario name worldwide. Kinda weird to completely rebrand your series on only the second installment, but oh well, I guess Paper Mario is a more fitting name. Now, you probably don't need me to tell you this, but Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door did absolutely amazingly at launch, and to this day is considered to be not only one of the greatest Mario games, but one of the greatest games in general of all time. The Thousand-Year Door is one of those legendary games, one of those games that's kind of in a league of its own, and well, just like the first Paper Mario, I've never fully played through this one on my own. Going into games of this caliber completely blind can be a bit intimidating. It's like I'm critiquing goddamn royalty here, for fuck's sake. Stuff like this usually goes one of two ways. Either the game lives up to the hype and you walk away with an understanding as to why it's so critically acclaimed and can finally sit at the cool kids table. Or on the flip side, the game fails to meet your expectations that were set so unrealistically high from the start and now you're on a bunch of people's shit list for the rest of your life. Basically, I don't want my opinion to be swayed either way before I've even had a chance to try the game myself. So I'm gonna try my best to disconnect myself from all the Paper Mario fans that won't shut up about this game and go in as neutral as possible. So let's forget everything we thought we knew about this game and finally check out Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door. The game starts by telling us about some garbage city that once upon a time was hopping and bopping until, Jenga, your city's fucked. Afterwards, they decided to build a new city on top of the old one and called it Rogueport. Rumors then started to spread about some kind of treasure hidden deep underground behind something called the Thousand-Year Door, but sorry to kill the good vibes, fellas, I already checked and there ain't shit back there. Cut to modern day and Rogueport is a straight up shithole, and just in case you couldn't tell, they put this happy little reminder right in the center for you. So Princess Peach is roaming the streets for whatever reason and manages to score a sick little box with a treasure map inside. Then we're taken to the Mario household, where even Nintendo admits they sometimes run out of ideas. Mario and Luigi then receive a letter from Peach with the map included, and she asks them to make a trip to Rogueport to help find the treasure. So we arrive at Rogueport, run into a shady group known as the X-Nauts, and learn that we need to find the 7 crystal plot MacGuffins to open the Thousand-Year Door, and also Peach gets kidnapped again, but who the hell cares anymore? But yeah, the Thousand-Year Door's plot is a pretty big step up compared to the original. I mean, that game was basically just, oh shit boys, he's at it again. Whereas the story in this game is a lot more fleshed out and engaging. Everything just feels more monumental here, which helps keep you invested throughout the entire adventure. In the first Paper Mario, outside of the little self-contained stories each chapter had, I just didn't really care. Like what? It's not like they were ever gonna have Mario fucking die or something unexpected like that. You could tell right from the start that it was nothing more than your typical Mario plot. Collect all the things, stop Bowser, save the princess, the end. Paper Mario 64 was predictable and only did just enough to get the job done in terms of plot. The Thousand-Year Door, on the other hand, has so much more going on. Like, there's always this sense of mystery, like, ooh, what's behind the big old door? Or who are the X-Nauts? Or why did they kidnap Peach? This is all stuff that kept me playing just so I could find out all of the answers. There's quite a few reveals that I didn't see coming as well. Like, there's some pretty well thought out and heavy aspects to the story. It's all stuff you wouldn't normally expect from a story in a Mario game of all things. The Peach sections from the first game return, except now they involve Peach teaching a computer about love, and honestly, it's adorable. But who the hell cares? You get to play as fucking Bowser, baby! I love these sections so much. You'll either play a 2D side-scrolling level or explore a specific area as you try and hunt down Mario. They don't add much to the overall plot, instead they're basically just brief intermissions where you get to laugh at how much of a fucking goober Bowser is. Bowser has always been a bit of a goof in every Mario RPG, but the Thousand-Year Door was the first game to really nail Bowser's characterization. Honestly, it's a shame there isn't a Paper Bowser or something that's just an entire game of these sections. Bowser seriously gets some of the best lines. I just hate that there's only a handful of these segments throughout the entire game. Gameplay-wise, the Thousand-Year Door plays almost identically to the first game. You'll be exploring an interconnected 3D world as you solve puzzles and battle enemies. It's all just as enjoyable here as it was on the N64. However, everything, and I mean everything, has received some kind of upgrade. Battles feature more depth, exploration is made more interesting with new upgrades that give you new ways to traverse the world, and any one of these third things that I'm too lazy to pick. There's just so many improvements made to the formula here. Like, take action commands for example. Paper Mario's bread and butter. You select an attack and then do a specific action to deal even more damage. That whole system is still here and is also available from the very start, thank God. But now, in addition, you also have stylish moves. You see, after you perform an action command, pressing the button again at a precise moment will have Mario or your partner doing something flashy to spice up the attack. Each attack can be followed up with a stylish move. However, the game never tells you when you'll need to press the button in order to perform these moves. It's completely up to you to figure it out. There's always a distinct rhythm to it though, and some attacks even allow you to chain a bunch of them together, and it feels so satisfying to pull off. It gives the combat this almost rhythm game feel. I don't know how else to explain it really. Now, the stylish moves are entirely optional, but their purpose ties into another new mechanic that adds even more depth to Paper Mario's battle system: the audience. The first Paper Mario featured this stage play aesthetic for its battles, and it was honestly pretty charming. But the Thousand Year Door takes it to a whole new level, with battles literally taking place on a stage, complete with an audience judging your every move. You see this counter here? This shows how many people are currently watching the battle. The more people watching, the faster your star power rises, which allows you to use certain special abilities. You can slowly increase the amount of audience members by correctly performing action commands, but you can get even more by also performing stylish moves with each attack. This is such a clever system since it incentivizes you to really focus on each battle and play your best in order to please the masses. In addition, if you time your action commands correctly, you'll sometimes have the opportunity to play this roulette minigame to get a huge boost in battle. There's just so much more going on here compared to the previous game. Like, I didn't even mention how if you don't pay attention, the audience or even the stage itself can damage you. All of this combined keeps you on your toes in each battle and gets rid of almost all of the tedious waiting that some other turn-based games can have. And it does all of this while still maintaining that beginner-friendly feel that the Paper Mario series is striving for. Like the first game, the Thousand Year Door is still remarkably easy, but it's also a much more engaging experience than its predecessor ever was. Now, just like, well, most Mario games, I guess. The Thousand Year Door features 8 distinct worlds, or chapters. Like I said in my Paper Mario 64 video, the locations and scenarios featured in each of the chapters in that game were without a doubt my favorite part of the entire experience. They were just so charming and pretty much made up for the otherwise lackluster overarching plot. However, those were nothing compared to what the Thousand Year Door has to offer. You see, while the original Paper Mario had some super memorable moments, like Tubba Blubba for example, they were always pretty grounded in the Mario universe. Like, nothing ever made me go, wait, what the fuck is this doing in a Mario game? The Thousand Year Door, on the other hand, goes completely off the rails. You'll get your identity stolen from a shape-shifting ghost, get into a shipwreck with a crew of pirates, and even play detective on a train as you try and find a suspect that threatens everyone with a sticky, yummy doom. However, while the premise of each chapter is more interesting than the first game's, the pacing is a whole different story. I just feel like there were too many instances where certain sections would come off as tedious or overstay their welcome. Like take the Glitz Pit in Chapter 3 for example, one of my favorites in the entire game. It's this big fighting tournament where you'll not only be participating in the tournament, but also trying to solve a mystery involving various participants that have gone missing. The concept is just so distinct, but sadly it starts to drag after a while as you're forced to do battle after battle in the tournament while small clues regarding the mystery are lightly sprinkled in. I just feel like this could have worked so much better if most of the chapter wasn't padded out with all of these tournament matches. They seriously could have cut out like half of them. They do at least try to keep it interesting by having each fight feature specific win conditions, such as only using your hammer, but that only does so much to relieve the issue. This isn't the only example of a chapter becoming overly tedious either. Chapter 2 will have you leading these small Pikmin-like creatures through a large dungeon. While it seems like an interesting concept at first, it'll start to wear on you as you wrestle with some questionable AI and solve these extremely basic puzzles that mostly just consist of weighing down various switches. Then there's the backtracking. My God, the backtracking. There's bits of it throughout the entire game, but the worst of it comes in Chapter 7. Basically, you need to find these 2 Bob-omb guys to activate a cannon for you. So you find the first one fairly easily, since he was literally just in the last chapter you played, but then there's General White. Who the fuck is General White? Am I supposed to know who this guy is? Frustrated, I look him up just to see what he looks like, and oh, it's that guy. He was in the village from the first chapter. So I quickly go all the way there, and wouldn't you know it, he just fucking left. The mayor says he apparently wanted to go to a more tropical location, so I go all the way to this tropical island, but guess what? Just missed him. You have to backtrack to pretty much every past area until eventually the game goes, you actually fucking did all that backtracking? He was in his house the whole time, you fucking dumbass. Like, it's played off as this kind of big old gag, I guess, but it's just not fun to play and completely stops the game's momentum dead in its tracks. It's like they were forced to make each chapter the same length, so they threw in sections like this just to meet that quota. However, issues like this honestly end up feeling like nitpicks, especially when you take a step back and look at each chapter as a whole. They all feature themes and locations that honestly feel so out of place in the Mario universe, but that's ultimately what makes them so appealing. Everything just has this quirky feel to it. Gone are the generic deserts and jungles Mario's known for. Instead, they're replaced by locations like a shady port town inhabited by pirates and bandits, or a mysterious forest with these beautiful shades of blue and purple that perfectly contrast with the monochromatic foliage found throughout the area. It's all a complete departure from the Mario formula in terms of level theming and makes for an incredibly memorable experience. But anyways though, that's all fine and good, but what would a Paper Mario game be without partners? Don't answer that. This time around, we've got Goombella, the aspiring archaeologist, Koops, the shy Koopa, Flurry, the washed-up actress, I guess. There's a peppy little Yoshi, which you get to name. I name mine Goobert. Vivian, also known as the best partner in the entire series. Bobbery, a retired sailor. And a partner who is completely optional, Miss Mouse. She's a mouse who's also a thief. Neat. While I enjoyed the cast of partners in the previous entry, when you start to compare them to the Thousand Year Door's partners, they start to look a bit one-dimensional. Paper Mario 64's partners felt more like tools rather than living, breathing characters. They pretty much existed solely to give Mario new abilities. However, that is not the case at all with the partners in the Thousand Year Door. Like, most of them have actual character arcs, like Vivian overcoming an abusive family relationship, and Bobbery, who is struggling to... actually, you know what, I don't want to spoil that one. Honestly, these are some of the best characters in the entire Mario series ever. Mostly because, well, you know, they have actual personalities that aren't just... that. Now, I could go on and on like this and list every little improvement the Thousand Year Door made over its predecessor, but I think you get the point by now. This game is the exact definition of what a perfect sequel should be. It literally takes every aspect of the previous entry and improves upon it in some meaningful way. The plot is more engaging, battles feature more depth, and partners are a lot more fleshed out. Not only that, but it completely goes against the Mario formula. Like, what other game can you see Mario stand next to a noose while someone gets the shit beat out of them in the background by the Mafia? It all just feels so weird, but like in the best possible way. In defying what we've come to expect from the series, it reignites what made the original Mario RPG so exciting back in 1996. It's unlike any other Mario game out there. Paper Mario 64 was an RPG that I can only describe as being truly Mario. But the Thousand Year Door is different. This is a game that takes everything Mario is known for and throws it out for something completely original. But it does this while still retaining that iconic Mario feel. Like, this is still unmistakably a Mario RPG, but it's also unlike anything that came before it. It was an incredibly risky move to take the series in this kind of a direction, but it was ultimately a move that paid off. Even with its flaws, this is truly a special game. It's a game that tries its hardest at every opportunity to improve on the foundation it was built upon. It takes the concept of Mario in an RPG and makes it magic again. Now, as I'm sure you're all already aware, this is the last time we'd see a Paper Mario game in this style. After the Thousand Year Door, the series would move away from its RPG roots and instead focus on action and adventure. Before playing these first two games myself, I was confused. I mean, why abandon such a beloved formula? Why not just give the fans what they want? But now that I've actually gotten to play these games, I kinda get it. Like, where could they have gone from here? The Thousand Year Door pretty much perfected everything with this style. If they continue making games like this year after year like the fans want, well, then these entries wouldn't be as special. I mean, just take a look at the Mario and Luigi games, for example. Even after the series peaked, they continued to follow the same old formula game after game until they literally ran it into the ground. As much as I hate to admit it, changing things up after the Thousand Year Door was without a doubt the smartest thing Intelligent Systems could have done. Instead of completely milking this style of game for everything it's worth, they chose to end on a high note and try something new. While their efforts to reinvent the series haven't always worked out, that will never change the fact that Paper Mario 64 and the Thousand Year Door are truly extraordinary. Zelda, Metroid, Mario Party, and of course, Paper Mario. What do all these things have in common? They all got completely f***ed on the Wii! Okay, not really, but in the case with Paper Mario, there's definitely a group of people out there that'll argue otherwise. After the critical success of the first two entries, expectations were fairly high. The original Paper Mario introduced us to a unique and charming twist on the RPG formula. Then the Thousand Year Door came along and nearly perfected that style of game. Creating a follow-up at this point was never going to be an easy task, but it was something we knew Intelligent Systems was more than capable of. We wouldn't have to wait long either. Only 2 years after the release of the Thousand Year Door at E3 2006, we'd get our first look at the follow-up to this GameCube classic.
What the hell is this?
Yeah, Paper Mario was now a 2D platformer and was originally announced as a light GameCube title before being reworked into a Wii game. Now, this was actually my introduction to the Paper Mario series. I rented it back when it first came out, and I loved it. I was completely enthralled by how this game depicted the Mario universe. The story, characters, gameplay, it was all unlike any other Mario game I had played at the time. This was my first Paper Mario game, and I thought I finally understood why this series was so highly regarded. Well, that is until I made the mistake of going online to see what other people thought. Now, the reactions I saw weren't all bad, but there were definitely quite a few hardcore Paper Mario fans that were quick to label this one as the black sheep of the series, the low point in an otherwise stellar lineup of games. If only they knew what was to come. So I thought, oh well, I guess I like a controversial game. I'll just keep that little detail to myself and never bring it up with Paper Mario fans in the fear of being ripped to shreds for it. And that's exactly what I did. But then fast forward to modern day, and well, people are a lot more positive towards it now, which made me feel a bit, whiplashed, I guess you could say. I mean, I went from thinking this game was despised by a certain section of the fan base to seeing those same people years later go, actually, you know what, maybe it wasn't that bad. Which, yeah, with hindsight, I can kind of see why they think that. So what's the deal with this game? Were some people too quick to judge just because it wasn't the Thousand Year Door 2? Or is this entry actually not that great when you compare it to the originals? Let's find out. So, in typical Paper Mario fashion, we start with an intro sequence to set the mood. It begins by telling us about a book called The Dark Prognosticus, which contains stories of future events. Apparently, a bunch of people sought after this book, wishing to see their future or whatever. However, no one who obtained the book ever found happiness. I guess a bunch of Paper Mario fans must have found it then. We're then taken to Peach and Bowser's wedding.
Finally!
But turns out the whole thing was forced by this clown that goes by the name Count Bleck, and Peach just refuses to go along with it.
God damn it!
But she's eventually forced to marry Bowser by one of Count Bleck's minions. With Peach and Bowser tying the knot, something called the Chaos Heart gets created. Luigi then plays the role of Wedding Crasher, jumps on the Chaos Heart, which causes an explosion, and bam! We're taken to the title screen. Now, this intro sequence is absolutely amazing. And not just because of, well, you know. It does exactly what any good introduction should do and instantly hooks you by just confusing the hell out of you. Like, why did Bowser and Peach have to get married? Who is Count Bleck? What happened to everyone after the explosion? It incentivizes you to immediately jump into the game just so you can make sense of it all. Honestly, this is without a doubt the most memorable introduction to any Paper Mario game ever. Though I may have a bit of a bias. Starting up the actual game though, we learn that, surprise surprise, Peach has been kidnapped. Again. So Mario and Luigi pay Bowser a visit because duh, who else could have done it, but learn that he actually isn't the culprit this time. Instead, Count Bleck shows up and reveals he's the one who kidnapped the princess. He then kidnaps everyone in Bowser's castle, leaving behind nothing but an unconscious Mario. Mario's then woken up by a butterfly named Tippy. She's apparently a pixel or a fairy and asks for Mario's help in stopping Count Bleck. She then takes Mario to a place called Flipside where we get a bit of an exposition dump on what the heck is going on. Here's the too long didn't read version. So apparently Blecky Boy here currently has the book that can predict the future. In the book he read about an event that will end all worlds, which he wants to do for reasons I won't spoil. To do this, a person of pure heart must marry some evil stud like Bowser in order to create the Chaos Heart, which causes a void to form in the sky, which will grow until it eventually consumes everything. Now, this is a very simplified version of the plot, and I'm leaving out a ton of details because, well, I don't really like spoiling stuff. But just know that there is a lot to this story. The whole thing starts off fairly tame though. For the first couple of chapters, it's just a story about some guy in a top hat trying to destroy the world. Nothing too outlandish. I mean, that's basically the plot of Monopoly, right? But by the time you hit the halfway point, stuff just gets real, man. Like there's this whole thing about a pair of lost lovers and Tippy, and then just, I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil it. But it's just so goddamn good. I praised the Thousand Year Doors plot for being so unprecedented for a Mario game, which I do still stand by, but at the end of the day, the Thousand Year Door still had a very video gamey plot, I guess you could say. Super Paper Mario's plot, on the other hand, is like something you'd see out of a best-selling novel or film. It's extremely well written, and actually had me getting fairly emotional during certain sections. However, no story is without faults, and Super Paper Mario's is no exception. Like I said, the actual narrative itself is top-notch, but since this is a Mario game, and Mario games apparently aren't allowed to have any less than 8 chapters, they were forced to stretch the story out for a bit longer than it needed to be. After I got to about the 5th or 6th chapter, I was just ready for it to end already. The game gets to a point where it stops introducing new elements like party members, abilities, and plot details, and just kind of coasts along in the latter half as you collect the remaining plot MacGuffins. In previous Paper Mario games, these low points in the story would usually be held up by the self-contained scenarios found in each chapter. But honestly, they aren't nearly as strong here as they were in past games. Don't get me wrong, there are still some extremely memorable moments, like having to pay off an expensive vase that you accidentally broke, or the ending of Chapter 3 where there's literally a dating sim section. However, the problem comes from how everything is structured. You see, instead of each chapter playing out as a continuous narrative like in previous titles, Super Paper Mario cuts each chapter into 4 stages. Basically, it's set up like a traditional Mario platformer, which makes sense for this new gameplay style. For the most part, this new structure works fairly well, but other times it just doesn't. You see, in order for something like this to work, each stage needs to add something meaningful to the experience. If a stage doesn't do this, it ends up feeling like pointless filler, and unfortunately that happens a bit too often here. Like, take Chapter 4 for example. You'll start out by floating around in space with this adorable little alien named Squirps as you shoot down enemies in a similar fashion to an old school shoot 'em up game. Alright, pretty cool concept. But we still have 3 more stages to go through. Is this shoot 'em up style of gameplay enough to fill an entire chapter? No, and thankfully the developers knew that. So the next stage involves Squirps having to take a little potty break, but uh-oh, the bathroom's occupied, and it's all out of toilet paper. Guess we gotta go find some. Cute concept, yeah, but I mean, come on, this is just filler. If this were structured more like the Thousand Year Door, this could have been just a cute little gag that we could have quickly moved on from, but nope. We gotta make a whole goddamn level out of this now. The next stage is more shoot 'em up stuff, except now you're going through a maze. Alright, more filler. And the final stage is this wacky, gravity-shifting labyrinth that ends in one of the most memorable boss fights in the game. So yeah, the chapter starts with this really interesting concept and ends with an extremely memorable finale. But everything in between is just filler. Like I said, I get why the game had to be structured like this, but they really needed to spend more time refining some of these stages. Or better yet, why does each chapter need 4 stages? If cutting out all the filler means some chapters are shorter than others, well then so be it. I'll never understand why so many games value quantity over quality like this. Anyways though, it's been like 10 or 11 minutes and I haven't talked about anything other than the story yet. And that's because, well, the story is honestly a major focus this time, even more so than it was in previous Paper Marios. You see, while the Thousand Year Door's plot was fairly captivating, it usually rode shotgun as you made your way through it. The focus was on the adventure itself, not the reason for the adventure. Super Paper Mario, on the other hand, puts a lot more significance on why you're doing what you're doing. It constantly reminds you that, hey, if you screw this up, we're all gonna die. It gives the plot this weight to it that wasn't present in any of the previous games. It contrasts fairly heavily with the areas you'll be exploring as well. They ditched the unique tone that the Thousand Year Door had with its locations, and instead reverted back to the grassy plains and vast deserts that the Mario series is known for. At face value, this may seem like a downgrade, however, this change ends up complementing the overall experience in my opinion. I know I said I hate doing this, but slight spoiler here. In the first half of the game, it's your typical Mario romp. You'll travel through these fun, colorful worlds as you complete silly tasks for quirky NPCs. But throughout it all, there's this black void that's always present in the sky, and you'll soon start to notice that it's growing. Getting bigger and bigger, filling you with more and more anxiety until eventually. It's been quite a while since I last played Super Paper Mario, and honestly, I had forgotten a decent amount about it in that time. But this right here, this moment where you return to that world and find nothing, I will never forget. It's this game's turning point as you go from happy-go-lucky Mario to characters literally fearing for their lives as they're staring death in the face. This drastic change of tone hits you like a rock when it finally happens. Things used to be so happy, so carefree, but now it's gone. But with all that out of the way, let's finally talk about gameplay. Like I said before, instead of being a turn-based RPG, Super Paper Mario is a 2D platformer. However, it isn't just a 2D platformer. You also have the ability to switch to 3D at any time with the press of a button. You can only stay in 3D for a short amount of time, but being in 3D literally gives you a completely new perspective on an area. This allows the developers to hide secrets and puzzles that would normally be hidden in a flat two-dimensional environment. For example, you might come across a dead end while in 2D, but if you switch to 3D, you might find a hidden path that wasn't visible to you before. This is such a cool mechanic. I mean, it's one of those things that just makes you go, how the hell didn't anyone think of this earlier? Now, while the mechanic is without a doubt an extremely cool concept, I don't feel like Intelligent Systems even came close to realizing its full potential. Most of the time it just boils down to hit a dead end and don't know what to do. Well, why not switch to 3D and oh, would you look at that? Another hidden pathway. And this basically applies to every puzzle throughout the game. They rarely deviate from this, like it's not even incorporated into the combat in any meaningful way. This means what once seemed like a fun and unique mechanic quickly turns into more of a novelty or a simple little party trick.
Oh, God damn it, do we get it? You can switch from 2D to 3D. Get some new goddamn material.
In order to make this feel more like a Paper Mario game and not just another 2D Mario platformer, Intelligent Systems tried to incorporate some RPG elements. Notice I said tried. For whatever reason, they decided to keep the leveling system from previous games, except instead of collecting 100 star points to level up, it's now based on how many points you have. Yeah, points finally have a purpose in a Mario game. This is such an unneeded system. I'm never paying attention to how many points I have, so leveling up always feels like it just happens randomly. Also, you can't choose which stat you level up like you could before. Sometimes it'll be your health, and other times it'll be your attack. Then there's the items. I always forget these are even here. Basically, using them grants you temporary perks, like raising your offense or defense. However, most enemies go down with just a bop or two to the head, so why even bother? These half-hearted attempts to include RPG elements make Super Paper Mario feel like it has a bit of an identity crisis. Like it doesn't know if it wants to be more of a platformer or more of an RPG. It just overcomplicates things, but thankfully you can ignore pretty much all of the stupid RPG stuff and just play this as a normal Mario platformer. But honestly, it's not even that great of a platformer either. If it's trying to replicate the feeling of old school Mario games, well then it completely failed. You see, a traditional 2D Mario game is usually focused around momentum. Mario builds up speed as you run, which directly impacts your jump arc. I mean, they literally included a meter for it in Mario 3. So yeah, momentum is pretty important in making a Mario game feel like, well, a Mario game. Super Paper Mario, however, has no sense of momentum whatsoever. There isn't even a run button, which makes the whole experience feel incredibly slow. If you couldn't already tell from the gameplay, Super Paper Mario is running off the same engine as the Thousand Year Door, and that right there should show you where these problems stem from. They tried to make a platformer in an engine made for an RPG. How do they think this is a good idea? Anyways though, I feel like my tone has completely changed. I mean, I started out by praising the story like it's the best thing ever. Then when the topic changed to gameplay, things took a bit of a turn. And well, that's basically Super Paper Mario in a nutshell. If you're someone who plays games mostly for story, well then you're gonna have an amazing time. But if you're more of a person who enjoys the, well, actual game part of a game, well, you're unfortunately gonna lose interest fairly quickly. Super Paper Mario's gameplay just lacks any sense of direction. It wants to be this unique blend of both a platformer and an RPG, but ends up executing both fairly poorly. These are two genres that are just not inherently compatible. I mean, platformers are usually focused on fast and kinetic gameplay, whereas RPGs are completely the opposite. They're slow and methodical, with a lot more focus on strategy and puzzle solving. Because of this, Super Paper Mario's mechanics are constantly conflicting with each other. It didn't have to be this way though. If they would have just picked one over the other, this wouldn't have been an issue. However, the platforming aspect would have needed a lot more work if they were to go that route. Like I said before, this is very obviously built in an engine meant for a slower paced RPG. Because of this, I think they should have leaned more into the RPG side of things. However, if you look through various interviews from the developers, it becomes pretty apparent that they had grown tired of creating RPGs after they finished the Thousand Year Door. To quote the game's chief director, he apparently wanted to make a game that could surprise people with brand new features within the Paper Mario concept. He then came up with the idea of switching between 2D and 3D, which he felt worked better in a more traditional Mario style. Fair enough, but why restrict yourself to an engine that's obviously not built with a traditional Mario style in mind? This game just doesn't feel like it was meant to be a platformer, but it was forced to because the developers wanted to try something new. Super Paper Mario really needed to be built from the ground up with an engine that didn't restrain it to the limitations of an RPG. But let's shift gears here and talk about something a bit more positive. Now, if there's one thing I love more than anything in a Paper Mario game, it's without a doubt the partners. So without further ado, let's bring them out. Here they are, the Super Paper Mario partner. What the fuck are you guys supposed to be? So yeah, the partner characters we've come to know and love from past games have been cut, and in their place we've got pixels. There's quite a few of them too. There's one that allows you to shrink, one that explodes, and even one that you can use as a hammer. While they've all got unique names, like f***ing Boomer over here, in terms of personality, they kinda have one, I guess. Like, yeah, they each get a fun little introduction scene once you first meet them, but after that, they never talk again. This is such a disappointment since some of them seem like they'd be pretty memorable characters if they were given just a bit more time to shine. But as it is, they might as well just be generic upgrades that you obtain. So yeah, pixels don't really fill the void left by traditional partners, but thankfully we also have multiple playable characters to make up for that. Peach, Bowser, and even Luigi are all playable in addition to Mario. They each come with their own special abilities. Peach can float through the air, Bowser is a goddamn tank and can breathe fire, and Luigi has a charge jump. They also bring their unique personalities to the table as well. Because of this, they're definitely a more suitable replacement for partners than Pixels were. However, I'm kinda split on them. On one hand, seeing as the cast is much smaller than it was in previous games, each character can get more screen time. You see, it's much more difficult to juggle 7 or 8 characters than it is to juggle 4. This also means they can be a lot more involved in the overarching story. However, on the other hand, these are all characters that we've seen a million times already. Now, I don't want to call them boring, but they're kind of boring. Especially when you compare them to characters like Vivian, Bo, or Bobbery, who were all completely original. They're also just not that useful in a gameplay sense either. Like, they're extremely situational. You see, about 90% of the game is centered around the dimensional swapping mechanic, which only Mario can do. So for most of the game, there's literally no reason to play as anyone other than Mario. Super Paper Mario could have been this breath of fresh air for the series. Not saying things had to change, but the developers needed to change, and I respect them for doing so. But this game is just a mess of ideas and mechanics that ultimately don't mesh. There's some really interesting stuff here though, like take the game's main selling point, the ability to switch from 2D to 3D. On paper, this is such a cool idea, but it's never expanded upon past the initial novelty of it. Instead of trying to build on concepts like this, they chose to shoehorn in a bunch of other half-baked mechanics that had no reason being here. There's just too much fluff and not enough substance. Thankfully, the story more than makes up for this. However, not everyone plays games for story, so your mileage may vary. Revisiting this game after so many years though, I was surprised by how many issues I had with it. Like, I absolutely adored this game when I was younger, but now, not so much. I mean, it's alright, the story at least. So, what happened? Am I just a boring, jaded adult now? Were my standards just lower? Were the Paper Mario fans right about this game back then? Well, no. You see, while I was looking through those old forum posts of Paper Mario fans talking about how disappointed they were with this game, there was something that was pretty consistent among those who said they loved it. It was their first Paper Mario game. And yeah, that was the case for me too. We had no idea what had been lost with this entry. We were able to just enjoy it for what it was, a Mario game with an extremely compelling story. Yeah, it wasn't perfect, but it was unlike anything we had played before. However, now that I've experienced what came prior to it, I find its flaws to be much more apparent. So yeah, I finally see where people were coming from back then. This game is definitely a downgrade compared to the previous titles. But I don't want to give the impression that this game isn't worth playing. Honestly, I still feel like this is the perfect entry point into the series, especially if you aren't that familiar with turn-based RPGs. Side-scrollers are just inherently more easy to wrap your head around. The story and quirky characters are also at least on par with what came before it, so it'll give you a pretty good idea of what the tone of the series is. Even if you are a Paper Mario veteran, I'd still say this game is worth playing, as long as you know what you're getting yourself into. For a first attempt at trying to reinvent Paper Mario, this was pretty solid, all things considered. You could tell the developers had a lot of ideas that they wanted to experiment with that wouldn't have necessarily worked in the previous RPG style. Yeah, there's a lot of rough edges, but that can also be said for the original Paper Mario on N64. Then they were able to take those rough edges and refine them to near perfection with its follow-up. A sequel to Super Paper Mario where they expand upon all these new ideas could be just as great as the Thousand Year Door was. So, you know what? I think the future of Paper Mario is looking pretty bright. I mean, they can only go up from here, right? 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 Dude, I fucking love this shit. Dude, I fucking hate this shit. Nintendo is a company that's pretty well known for their consistent level of quality. And this is because, well, they know their shit. But while this has led to some amazing games over the years, it's also resulted in them becoming a bit arrogant at times, with them seeming to just throw out any fan feedback they might get. Because of this, we've gotten quite a few stinkers over the years, with some being a bit worse than others. Oh god, it's fucking rancid. 2001, the original Paper Mario surprises us all by being an extremely accessible and charming RPG. 2004, Paper Mario gets a sequel, and it nearly perfects everything the first game set out to do. 2007, they got a little wacky with this one. It's a 2D platformer now, and it's got a really good story. Sure wish they make another RPG though. Now it's 2010, and E3 rolls around, and whoa. Would you look at that? A brand new Paper Mario is coming to Nintendo's fancy new handheld. And it's an RPG? Well, goddamn, sign me up. Basically, the point I'm trying to make here is, at this point in time, among a certain section of Nintendo fans, Paper Mario was huge. So you can only imagine how big of a deal this was. The 3DS was just announced and set to release the following year, and for a lot of people, this game was a system seller. So we all picked up our 3DSs on launch day and immediately got burned when the price was cut just a few months later. But it was okay because that brand new Paper Mario was right around the corner. But then it finally came out, and well... Now, at the time, Paper Mario Sticker Star's reception among critics was actually relatively positive, with most praising its charm and fresh take on the RPG formula. However, jumping on over to the Dark Circle jerk that is the user reviews section, tells us a completely different story. A story of a game that is apparently so shit, so much shit in this motherfucking dumb piece of shit atrocity. So what happened? How did a game with so much anticipation and excitement riding on it turn into this? Well, let's rewind a bit. In 2007, on the surface at least, things were looking pretty good for Paper Mario. Each entry had received very high praise, and the latest release, Super Paper Mario, would even go on to sell more than double what its predecessors had. However, behind the scenes, things weren't looking so bright, with the series going through a bit of an identity crisis. This becomes pretty apparent when you go through the various interviews that were conducted around this time. When asked about the future of the series, the game's director, Ryota Kawade, seemed uncertain. But Kensuke Tanabe, Paper Mario's producer, was a bit more direct, stating straight up that he doesn't think things will ever go back to how they were before. This makes me think that internally, there was a lot of uncertainty as to what a Paper Mario game should be. Should it be a traditional RPG like before, or have more of a focus on action and adventure? Eventually though, Kawade would step away from the series to work on other projects like Brain Age and a Fire Emblem card game. So now, not only was Paper Mario left without a sense of direction, but it was also left without a director. This caused the series to be passed on to a completely new team, with only a handful of previous members returning. In 2009, they'd start work on a new Paper Mario game, which would make its first public appearance at E3 2010. Like I said before, the overall reaction to this build was extremely positive. It looked to be exactly what the fans were asking for, with turn-based battles and partners finally making a return. But not everyone was feeling so hot on it, because when Grumpy Wumpy Miyamoto got to try it, he straight up called it boring and thought it was too similar to the Thousand Year Door. That's a bad thing? So Miyamoto became a lot more involved in the project and requested quite a few changes. This included modifying the overall tone of the game, as well as requesting it to have less of a focus on story. Apparently, in Miyamoto's own words, it's fine without a story, so do we really need one? In addition, they were now only allowed to use already established characters from the Mario universe, so no Vivians or Bobberys allowed, I guess. This all completely went against what Paper Mario was known for, and as you can imagine, made development quite a bit more difficult, as they were now forced to really think outside of the box. However, I can kind of see where Miyamoto was coming from. You see, Mario games are usually built around a singular mechanic, and rarely have any excess fluff, such as a story or original characters, to get in the way of that. This design philosophy is what makes Mario games so enjoyable to such a wide range of people. Miyamoto basically invented this philosophy, and Nintendo applies it to pretty much every Mario game they work on. But just because this works for a traditional Mario game, doesn't mean it'll work for a paper Mario game. RPGs are just too complicated of a genre to apply such a simple design philosophy to. And whether Miyamoto likes it or not, that's exactly what Paper Mario is, in RPG. Anyways though, the singular mechanic they decided to go with here were stickers. You see, in the E3 2010 build, stickers were used to solve various puzzles in the overworld, and as far as I can tell, that's all they were used for. But after Miyamoto got involved and applied that patented Miyamoto design philosophy, they went all in on stickers. Puzzle solving, battles, progression, it's all stickers, baby. So how do you apply something so simple to every aspect of an RPG? Easy. You You don't. But fuck it, they did it anyways. Now, puzzle solving, sure, yeah, I like that. Stick the bridge sticker on the gap to get across. Yeah, that sounds like it could be pretty neat. But also applying that same mechanic to everything else? Yeah, I don't fucking think so. Let's get the big one out of the way first. Battles. So battles are turn-based, and just like previous entries, you also have action commands, which have you timing your button presses to do more damage. But that's where the similarities end, because from here on out, it's all fucking stickers. So each one of your attacks corresponds to a sticker. You find these stickers everywhere in the overworld or purchase them from a shop. But get this, here's the kicker. Each sticker can only be used once. Now, on paper, this sounds like a pretty interesting concept for a turn-based RPG, but in reality, it's fucking stupid as shit. You can only carry a limited amount of stickers, and if you run out, that's it. You literally can't do anything else. Well, besides running, sometimes. More on that later. This one-time use system basically encourages you to hoard all of your best stickers and not waste them on weaker enemies. But doing so will clog up your stupid fucking sticker album and prevent you from picking up more stupid fucking stickers. So then you gotta throw out a bunch of the stupid fucking stickers because they thought it'd be fucking hilarious if some took up half a fucking page. Honestly, I ended up just running from any battle I could, because get this, battles are literally pointless. Like actually, there's no point to them. Remember, this is that tried and true Miyamoto design philosophy we're talking about here. So anything that could conflict with that singular sticker mechanic gets tossed to the fucking curb. This is ultimately why the partner characters got axed, because they conflicted with the battle system. But they also axed any kind of experience or leveling system. So you actually don't gain anything from battling. I guess you get a few coins, but coins are everywhere in this game. I mean, you literally get showered with them for completing a level, so they're not much of a reward. Battles are just a complete waste of time and resources. Like, there's a couple of sections where you choose to either fight or just pay the enemy a ransom, and the game is like expecting you to just fight them, but nah, just take the money, dude. So yeah, I just ran from any battle I could. Emphasis on could, because while you can run from most battles, including bosses, sometimes the game's just like, oh, I don't fucking think so, champ. I literally made it all the way to the final boss, only to fucking run out of stickers. And this just so happened to be one of the few fucking battles you can run from. So all I could do is just sit there and die. Doesn't that sound like a fun system to base your entire fucking game around? Then there's progression, which is also tied to stickers. So you go through the game using a mostly linear world map, which is so much less interesting than the interconnected worlds of previous games. But that's not even the worst part. Far from it. Things, yes, things. What things am I talking about? Every fucking thing. Fans, scissors, vacuums, a fucking go. These things are collectibles you'll find throughout the game, and while they can be used in battle, they're mostly used for progression. Like, there's this windmill, right? And goddamn thing won't move. So you need to use the fan thing to make it spin. But silly you can't just use the thing. You have to bring the thing all the way back to the main town, fling it at a wall to turn the thing into a sticker. Now you can stick the thing sticker onto the overworld to move the windmill. This isn't just a one-time deal either. There are a ton of puzzles like this throughout the entire game, and every time you have to find the thing, bring it back to town, fling the thing, then go back to the area and use the fling thing. But that's still not even the worst part, because these things are never found in the levels they're actually needed in. Like, take this stage for example. It's a volcano with a bunch of lava blocking your way. So, I guess it's just a dead end, right? Nope. You're just supposed to know that you need to place a fucking fridge on top of the volcano to freeze everything over. But there's not a goddamn fridge in sight. No, you have to scour each level for a fridge, then bring it all the way back. But don't forget to fling the thing, of course. Nothing clues you in on the fact that you might need to place a goddamn fridge on a volcano here. Not even your worthless sidekick Kirsty. God, I fucking hate Kirsty. This shit is even in the boss battles, where you're expected to know what thing sticker to use and when. Nothing stops you from accidentally using it too early or too late as well. The game just expects you to know all this beforehand. Now, these puzzles could be fun and charming, in a way, but they're just so poorly designed. I'm not saying they needed to, completely hold your hand and tell you the solution or whatever, but just some kind of hint as to what you might need would have been, nice. Hell, just put the thing in the levels they're needed for, and that solved this whole mess. It all kind of reminds me of those super old point-and-click games where you were just supposed to experiment until you eventually found the right answer. Or, just look it up. This is the complete opposite of good game design, and it's baffling that something like this came from Nintendo of all companies, who's usually pretty thoughtful when designing this kind of stuff. Just nothing works in this game. Battles are utterly pointless, the way you progress isn't intuitive at all, and the whole sticker gimmick is just dumb. Nowhere does this game benefit from this streamlined design philosophy. This whole game just feels like it was cobbled together to appease the higher-ups at Nintendo or something. But that's not to say it's all bad. I mean, the soundtrack and visual style are nice. Also, there were a few moments where I was actually having quite a bit of fun. Like this area where you're going through a big mansion hunting down booze, or even the entirety of World 3 where you're helping this big old wiggler find his lost body segments. God, I love this guy. Stuff like this honestly made me feel like I was actually playing a Paper Mario game. These moments were just filled with that Paper Mario quirkiness that I love so much. But these moments are only 10% of the actual game. The rest is just you slogging through a ton of super generic linear levels as you interact with a bunch of toads that all have the same boring personality. The majority of this game just doesn't feel like a Paper Mario game. Honestly, they should have just called it something different, like Cardboard Mario or something. Now, I've spent a lot of time ragging on Miyamoto here, but to be fair, he's not entirely to blame. There were also quite a few other Nintendo higher-ups that viewed Paper Mario in a similar fashion. And like I said, I can sort of understand why. Other than just being overly protective of the Mario IP, they wanted to give Paper Mario that same universal appeal that the mainline Mario games are known for. And you want to know the crazy part? It might have actually worked. Well, in Nintendo's eyes at least. While it wasn't by much, it managed to sell more than both the original and the Thousand Year Door. And since Nintendo was already uncertain about returning to the original RPG formula, this might have been enough to convince them that this was the right direction to take. Honestly, if Sticker Star didn't sell as much as it did, I think Paper Mario, as a franchise, would have just died here. It's extremely obvious that none of the higher-ups at Nintendo are even remotely interested in making anything that resembles the first two games. Nintendo and the hardcore Paper Mario fans just don't see eye to eye. The bigwigs at Nintendo call the shots, and this is what they want Paper Mario to be. If the people don't want this, well, then I guess the people don't want Paper Mario. It sucks, I know, I mean, I'm right there with you all. I truly want nothing more than for things to go back to how they were before. But I really do feel this is why Sticker Star turned out the way it did. So yeah, from what I can tell, this is the reality of the situation. And you know what? I'm a positive person. Like I said, there were some things in this game I was able to enjoy. So who knows? Give it a game or two and maybe this formula could work. Or, you know, it could not.
Alright, so let's recap. Paper Mario Sticker Star.
Uh-oh! From the fanbase's perspective, Paper Mario Sticker Star was irredeemable. A stain on an otherwise flawless series of games. However, that's only half of the story. If you take a look at what critics were saying at the time, you'd see a completely different picture being painted. Critics loved this thing and praised the very aspects that fans were so fiercely protesting. And that's not all. Despite this drastic split between fans and critics, it sold pretty damn well, and would even go on to win the DICE Awards title of Handheld Game of the Year in 2013. So basically, Sticker Star was in this extremely awkward place, where depending on where you looked, it was either the worst game of all time or one of the best 3DS games ever. It was anyone's guess where Paper Mario would go from here, but 4 years later, we get our answer. So in 2016, while other platforms were celebrating new hardware launches and amazing game releases, Nintendo fans were left in this weird limbo state. The Wii U was only 4 years old at this point, and already Nintendo was looking to jump ship. The Wii U was the literal laughingstock of the 8th console generation. Underpowered hardware, messy marketing, and a lack of any kind of direction doomed the console from the start. There was absolutely nothing that could save this sinking ship. So Nintendo cut their losses and announced their next console, codenamed NX, would be releasing in March of 2017. Cool! Finally a light at the end of the tunnel! Nintendo fans finally have something to look forward to! But what do we do in the meantime? I mean, Nintendo can't just take a year off until the NX is finished. They still have to give Wii U owners something. And thus, 2016 turned into the biggest nothing year for Nintendo, filled with underwhelming remakes, Star Fox Zeros, and to cap off the year, we would get the final Nintendo-published Wii U exclusive, Paper Mario Color Splash. Despite the outcry, despite all of the valid criticism from the fan base, this was Nintendo and Intelligent Systems choosing to double down on what Sticker Star had established. And fans were pissed. Almost immediately after the announcement, a petition was made demanding Nintendo outright cancel the game. Pretty much every video mentioning it was dislike bombed. This was Federation Force all over again. However, compared to Federation Force, I feel this game's announcement hurt even more. Because this wasn't just a spin-off like that game was. No, Color Splash was the next big mainline entry in the Paper Mario series. Sticker Star apparently wasn't just some one-off experiment. Whether we liked it or not, this was the direction the series was heading. Paper Mario was no longer a series of quirky RPGs. It was now an action-adventure game centered around a single gimmick. No matter how you looked at it, this announcement basically confirmed what we all feared, that the Paper Mario we all loved was dead. But regardless of all the backlash, Paper Mario Color Splash would eventually release on October 7th, 2016, and actually reviewed fairly well. But then 13 days later, the Switch was revealed, so nobody cared. But I can't really blame anyone for passing on Color Splash, and I especially can't blame them for reacting the way they did when it was revealed. I mean, shit, have you played Sticker Star? It's aimless, uninspired, boring, and just all around poorly designed. Like, Sticker Star was a hot load of garbage, so who the hell would want to buy a sequel to that? But bless their little heart, Nintendo apparently did read all of those toxic emails we sent them, because Color Splash includes some very meaningful improvements based on that feedback. But was it enough to fully redeem this new style of Paper Mario? Let's find out. So I think the easiest way to structure this whole thing is to compare the most controversial elements from Sticker Star directly to Color Splash and see how it attempts to improve upon those aspects. So I took a little trip down Nintendo Fan Avenue and put together this list of the top things people had issues with in Sticker Star. So let's get started with... Now, while I wouldn't say Sticker Star Story made a bad first impression, it was more like it didn't make any impression at all. It starts out with the festival that the whole Mushroom Kingdom is invited to. But then Bowser shows up at... Wait a goddamn fucking second. Yeah, we've been here before. We've done this. And this is literally all the story you get. During Sticker Star's development, Miyamoto was apparently quoted as saying, "Sticker Star is fine without a story, so do we really need one?" The fuck it is! No, don't get me wrong. Miyamoto is absolutely a game design genius. But he's not a jack of all trades. This philosophy of foregoing any kind of narrative only really works in the types of games Miyamoto helped popularize, platformers. You know, games where the appeal comes from the unique challenges each level introduces. In those games, a story isn't needed because the distinct level tropes are enough to keep you interested throughout. But in a turn-based game like Sticker Star, where so much of the game is based on repetition, you absolutely need something like a story to break up that monotony. So, no, Sticker Star was not fine without a story, and yes, it really needed one. Color Splash, in comparison, starts off pretty promising by opening with a mystery. It's a dark and stormy night when Mario and Peach receive a dead-ass Toad in the mail from an unknown sender. They then determine it was sent from a tourist destination called Port Prisma and set out to figure out what the hell is going on. However, once they arrive, they find the once bustling port town is completely deserted, with most of its color missing. But who could have done such a thing? Bowser. It was Bowser. Of course it was fucking Bowser! So yeah, while the setup for the story is a massive step up from Sticker Star, the reveal that it was just Bowser, again, shows Color Splash's reluctance to make any real improvements compared to its predecessor. And like, what makes it so frustrating is they could have totally done so much more with this plot. So, spoiler alert, who gives a fuck? So, the big reveal is Bowser is actually innocent, as he always is. You see, he just wanted his shell painted like a rainbow. So, he jumps into this big paint fountain and accidentally mixes all the colors together, creating black paint. The black paint then causes him to go mad, which leads to him stealing all the world's color to make even more black paint, so he can paint the entire world black. So, I guess I was wrong. Bowser wasn't responsible at all for this whole mess. It was actually Black Bowser. You know, literally the same villain as last time, just with a new coat of paint. Literally. So like, I don't know, that's all fine or whatever, but they just could have done so much more with this concept. Like, what is the black paint? Why can it possess Bowser? Is the black paint, like, alive? I mean, it almost seems like a parasite or something, so it's gotta be sentient, right? But we don't get answers to any of that. As far as we know, he's just a big old goopy boy. So, yeah, that's lame. But based on some concept art, it seems like they actually did want to expand on this. There's concept art of this, like, black cape guy that was supposed to possess Bowser instead of the paint and makes him look really badass. And just, why did they cut this? A brand new original villain like this would have been so much more interesting than some goopy motherfucker. But I know why they dropped it. They dropped it for the same reason all the other characters are fucking Toad! So, yeah, one of the biggest issues people had with Sticker Star was the fact that there were basically no original characters whatsoever. It was all generic Toads and Mario enemies. And Color Splash, well, Color Splash doesn't really do much to fix it. Now, the supposed reason for this is due to Intelligent Systems borrowing the Mario IP from Nintendo and them no longer being allowed to stray too far from the established Mario brand. But why could they before, I hear you asking? Well, back then, Mario games were all over the place. 1 second Mario is saving the Mushroom Kingdom, the next he's dunking on fucking LeBron James. One game stars have smiles, the next they don't. Bowser has a kid. He looks like this. Oh wait, never mind, I guess this is his kid. The Mario brand was a bit of a mess throughout the 2000s, and honestly, I don't think anyone would argue that was a bad thing. It made each game feel unique, like they all had their own identity. But Nintendo and Miyamoto, well, they felt like they were losing their boy. I feel Nintendo was afraid Mario was starting to lose any sense of brand identity. Basically, Nintendo wanted Mario to be their Mickey Mouse, and in their eyes, this throw anything at the wall approach was not going to work. They risked turning Mario into an overcomplicated mess of a brand that could potentially become unrecognizable to a more casual audience. So, sometime in the early 2010s, a change was made. Nearly all Mario games, whether they be mainline, spin-off, or anything in between, started adhering to some very strict guidelines. Everything was seemingly unified into a single brand image that now needed to be strictly followed. Now, while Nintendo definitely let themselves stray or add to this new Mario brand from time to time, third parties and other studios didn't seem to share that same freedom, which meant, of course, Intelligent Systems would now have to work within these new restrictions when it came to Paper Mario. However, bringing up some of that concept art again, you can see various examples of the developers testing the waters in regards to what they could and couldn't get away with. Intelligent Systems definitely wanted to have a bit more fun with character designs this time around, possibly due to fan feedback. But thank God Nintendo was there to rein those sons of bitches in. I mean, Christ, Paper Mario without a bunch of generic-ass Toads? That's disgusting. But regardless of these restrictions, the development team's passion and creativity still manages to shine through. You see, while each Toad and Shy Guy may look the same, their personalities are completely unique thanks to the amazing writing in this game. Now, this might be an unpopular opinion, but I feel this is some of the best writing in the entire series. Yeah, the first 3 games had their fair share of charming dialogue that got a chuckle or two out of me, and then there's Sticker Star that had the whole squad laughing, but Color Splash is on a whole other level. The writing seriously carries the entire experience, which thank God it does because the gameplay. Yep, it's Sticker Star. Again. Just replace the stickers with cards and yep, it'll be $60. So for those of you who don't know, this battle system is all about single-use attacks. You find cards in the overworld which you can use in battle, but once you use them, they're gone for good. Now, in theory, this sounds like it could be fun. I mean, there are tons of games where this kind of resource management is the central mechanic. Like, just take a look at the entire shooter genre, where you have to constantly manage ammo. The problem here is just, why? There is absolutely no point to battling because there's no reward. You get nothing. Yeah, you get a few coins and these little hammer things that increase the amount of paint you can carry, but the game literally showers you with both of these things in the overworld, so why even fucking bother? Battles literally just exist as speed bumps to slow down your progress, and ain't no one getting excited about a speed bump. Ooh. But to be fair, the battle system was apparently never meant to be the main focus. As the developers have stated multiple times, despite its use of a turn-based battle system, Color Splash is not an RPG like its predecessors. At its core, this is an action-adventure game with puzzle solving acting as the focal point. And if you judge it based on that alone, you'll find a lot to enjoy here. One second you'll be exploring a haunted hotel as you help ghosts get settled in, and the next you'll be cooking a pizza for a restaurant full of hungry toads. There's a ton of variety here, and it's all complemented perfectly by the amazing writing. This game is truly at its best when it's embracing those more action-adventure elements, but then you hit those fucking speed bumps. Ooh. Just straight up, the battle system does not belong here. It doesn't add anything to the experience. It conflicts with literally every other aspect that makes this game worthwhile. Like, you'll be having a great old time exploring a lost island with a bunch of pirates, jumping in and out of an alternate dimension, and I mean, this is an action-adventure game, right? So why not take a page out of another more action-adventure-focused Paper Mario's playbook and have the battles be more, I don't know, more action-oriented? Instead of having this absolute momentum killer of a system that stops any action or adventure dead in its tracks. But I have to give them some credit. There are quite a few additions that at least make Color Splash's version of this battle system a bit of a step up from Sticker Stars. Like, you can hold way more cards now. The game actually gives you hints when you need to use certain cards. And coloring in cards to make them stronger is a really neat mechanic when used in certain scenarios. And this is basically Color Splash in a nutshell. I mean, yeah, Color Splash is unfortunately Sticker Star too. It shares a lot of Sticker Star's DNA, and because of that, it inherits a lot of the same issues. The story can be forgettable, character designs are generic, and the battle system is shallow and repetitive. But I think it's still important to recognize that despite this being Sticker Star 2, the exact thing we the fans didn't want, they still made some very meaningful improvements to this formula. The writing is in a league of its own, the locations and set pieces are super fun and memorable, and the battle system, while still flawed in execution, includes some very nice quality of life additions. Then there's all that concept art of stuff that was left on the cutting room floor, which shows they potentially wanted to push things even further, but weren't allowed to. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, regardless of Color Splash's many flaws, you still have to recognize that, hey, at least they tried. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally, acceptance. When I say these words, what do they make you think of? Yeah, me too. Who knew this piece of shit had so much in common with the stages of grief? You got denial that the thing you once loved is gone, anger and bargaining when Sticker Star rolls around, and then the depression hits. And, well, now I guess we're on acceptance, right? And you know what? I feel that word acceptance is a pretty good way to describe where the Paper Mario fanbase is at this point. You see, after Color Splash's launch and the tone-deaf developer interviews that followed, any ounce of hope that remained for Nintendo to backpedal on this new direction for Paper Mario was gone. The quirky and unique RPG series that we all fell in love with was truly dead. Seemingly no amount of petitions, angry comments, or just straight up low sales were going to change that. All that was left to do now was to just accept that. And accept it we did, because in 2020, when a new Paper Mario was announced out of nowhere that was seemingly just Sticker Star 3, instead of responding with the same vitriol that the last game received, the response to this announcement was a resounding, huh. I mean, like I said, we had all basically accepted that this is just the way things are now. No use fighting it. Daddy ain't coming back, champ. And honestly, I think a lot of people were genuinely excited for this one. I mean, not that that's saying much, people are kind of desperate for anything to get excited for back then. But regardless, this was the first time in basically a decade that the conversation surrounding Paper Mario wasn't filled with hatred and negativity. It was filled with some excitement and a refreshing amount of positivity. I mean, yeah, this was far from what we actually wanted, but there were definite signs that Nintendo was at least kind of listening. This announcement trailer showed off partners, original villains, what looked to be an interesting premise, and unique locations to explore. All things fans were begging Nintendo to bring back. But was all this positivity and excitement warranted? Is this game actually a step in the right direction? I mean, if you have 15 minutes spare, we can find out together. Alright, so, title screen. Yeah, this shit didn't need to go this hard. So, we start with Mario and Luigi driving to some origami festival. Damn, it's looking like my childhood birthday parties. So, Peach is a zombie, Bowser's in my sex dungeon, and... This right here is when I started to get really excited about this game. An actual original villain, not just Bowser, or Bowser with a literal new coat of paint. It's a brand new fucking scoundrel for us to chase down. The Origami King starts strong, like really strong. The whole premise of this new villain named Ollie turning the entire Mushroom Kingdom into an army of mindless origami soldiers is a massive step up from the previous two game story of, uh-oh, Bowser kidnapped your girl. Hopefully it can keep this up, and it does. Moving on to the first area of the game, you got this forest filled with these talking trees that whisper about you and they sing like... Sticker Star would have had this whole area be just a forest with a bunch of fucking toads wearing a Die Hard Tree shirts. But no, here's an area filled with this unique species of tree people, and there's all these cool set pieces, and oh, Paper Mario is fucking back, baby! But actually, it's not. Delving a bit deeper, you'll quickly realize that this isn't some grand return to the series' roots. No, it's completely the opposite. Paper Mario the Origami King represents yet another shift in direction for the franchise, and reveals a bit of a pattern that's been developing. You see, Paper Mario isn't just one thing. It's a playground or a crafts table. A crafts table where the developers are free to introduce a concept, refine that concept if need be, and then move on. It's happened time and time again. Paper Mario isn't an RPG, it isn't a platformer. It's whatever the developers want it to be. Unlike other franchises which attempt to iterate on the same pre-established conventions game after game, once Paper Mario perfects something in the eyes of its developers, they move on. Is this a perfect approach to game design? Hell no! But it at least keeps things fresh for both the developers working on the games as well as the people playing them. The last big shift for the franchise was back in 2012 with Paper Mario Sticker Star. That game introduced a controversial shift to a single-use attack battle system, and in the eyes of Nintendo and Intelligent Systems, Color Splash took that idea to its natural conclusion, which meant it was time for yet another change. Now, the Origami King is, without a doubt, cut from the same cloth as Sticker Star. That much is obvious from the moment you boot up the game. It just has that Sticker Star vibe going on, you know, with the look and feel and ugh. At first glance, yeah, this is just Sticker Star 3. But then you get to your first battle. Ring battles are the new big gimmick this time around. Basically, you shift around 4 rings to line up enemies in either a straight line or a square to defeat them all in one go. It's honestly an extremely unique concept for a battle system that really sets this game apart from its predecessors, and so far, I like it. And now I hate it. Oh, they got their fucking sticker gunk all over this shit too. While the concept of these battles are undeniably more interesting than the previous 2 games, they're still just as tedious. The lack of any meaningful rewards, such as experience, upgrades, or literally anything else, makes each battle feel completely devoid of purpose. I mean, yeah, you get coins, but just like with Sticker Star and Color Splash, coins are littered all over the overworld, so like, thanks. Coins do at least serve some purpose in battles, allowing you to buy more time or even just pay to have the game play itself. Wow. But still, this doesn't at all justify the complete lack of any other substantial rewards in battles. That's not to say it's all bad, though. In moderation, the ring-based battles still provide a refreshing twist to the genre. This system allows each battle to be a lot more dynamic and requires both critical thinking and quick decision making, which adds a layer of depth that you don't tend to see in turn-based games like this. I honestly can't stress enough how satisfying it feels to finally arrange the enemies perfectly and take them all out in a single turn. And this is all amplified by the incredible music and sound design, which dynamically changes depending on the area you're in and what's happening in the battles. It's all really great stuff. Then there's the boss fights, which puts a unique spin on the whole thing. Here, you have to maneuver Mario to the boss in the center of the ring while avoiding obstacles and enabling switches. Honestly, I enjoy these quite a bit more than the normal battles. They're a ton of fun. However, the issue is how frequent battles can be and how they're utilized. Battles quickly begin to feel more like punishments rather than organic encounters. You're constantly thrown into a battle each time you mess up. It quickly goes from, oh cool, another battle, to, oh, I f***ed up and have to do another one of these. They exist solely as roadblocks or hurdles to get in your way. Developers even admitted to this in an old Game Informer interview. Now, this was an issue in the previous 2 entries as well. However, the problem is made even worse here due to these battles taking so much longer than Sticker Star and Color Splashes. In those games, spamming attacks tended to end battles fairly quickly. You didn't really need to think about it. It was very mindless. But here, like I said before, battles sometimes require some pretty heavy strategic thinking. This increased complexity results in battles that tend to overstay their welcome more often than not, when all you're trying to do is get to the end of this goddamn fucking volcano. In turn-based games like this, battles typically act as the focal point of the entire experience. However, when the battles also serve as the primary form of punishment, it creates a problem. Games are meant to be enjoyable, right? And punishments within games tend to detract from that enjoyment. So basically, the main draw of fun in this game also acts as the main detractor of fun. Do you see the problem here? The reason this is such an issue is because everything else in the Origami King really is that amazing. And it sucks being constantly torn away from that. The world is vast and interconnected this time, and encourages exploration with various toads and gags hidden everywhere. Then you'll encounter various travel companions, each with their own character arcs, such as a professor, Kamek, or Bobby the Bob-omb. Oh god, I would fucking die for this little guy. Also Olivia. Big fan. This all addresses most of the shortcomings the previous two games had, offering a more immersive experience that fills in a lot of the gaps that Sticker Star and Color Splash had. It's all these aspects that make it all the more disappointing to be constantly drawn away from it by all these battles. And they knew this shit would get old too. Because to break up the monotony, whenever you get to a mini-boss, instead of sucking you out of the action like all the other encounters do, these take a more traditional approach, highlighting the disparity between the two types of battles. These traditional mini-boss fights just flow so much better with the rest of the game, providing a more enjoyable and cohesive experience. A better balance could have been achieved by just having most of the battles be like this, and then reserve the lengthier ring-based puzzle battles for the more significant encounters, like boss fights. This kind of approach really would have gone a long way in alleviating how tedious ring battles become, and would have helped maintain a better flow with the overworld exploration. Which, that's really what it all boils down to. Flow, or a lack thereof. Paper Mario the Origami King has all of these really great ideas packed into it, some of which come pretty close to capturing what made the earlier entries so beloved. The unique battle system, the colorful environments, the quirky humor, partner characters, each of these elements on their own are really solid. But when they all come together, it doesn't really mesh well. Overworld exploration is fun, but battles are constantly getting in the way of that. But at the same time, those battles are pretty engaging in their own right, but serve no purpose outside of functioning as literal roadblocks. Then there's the partner characters, which provide some pretty funny banter in the overworld, but in battle, they just kinda... yeah. Everything here feels so segmented. There's no sense of cohesion. Just a lot of ideas. Some interesting, some half-baked, all shoved into a package for $60. But you know what? For the Paper Mario fanbase, that might just be good enough at this point. While the Origami King isn't at all what fans wanted or asked for, it's also not a complete abomination like its predecessors were. While yeah, the final package is a bit of a mixed bag, there's still obvious signs here that Nintendo is listening and willing to at least compromise?
Like, it's blatantly obvious at this point that Nintendo's vision for Paper Mario doesn't match ours at all. Nintendo would rather the series be a more casual-focused experience that's constantly evolving and surprising players with new gameplay elements and mechanics, while longtime fans want a more core experience with much more complexity and depth. Nintendo obviously isn't willing to budge on their vision, but they still don't want us core fans feeling left out, so this is what we got. Yet another evolution to the Paper Mario formula that, while still far from what fans wanted, still includes some elements that we've been asking for. The interconnected overworld, original villain, partner characters, and plot are all signs that Nintendo is definitely acknowledging fans and making an effort to create a game that they can enjoy as well. But the fact of the matter is, the Paper Mario we all truly want is long dead. No amount of denial, anger, bargaining, or depression is going to change that. I mean, come on. You've all seen the interviews. There'd have to be some pretty big shakeups in the upper management at Nintendo for that to change at this point. But still, you can't deny that the Origami King represents a huge step in the right direction, and I'm genuinely excited to see where Nintendo takes the series next. Which, like it or not, all signs are pointing to this ever-evolving direction for Paper Mario being here to stay. So, all we can really do now is approach each game with an open mind and accept that.
Alright, well, never mind, I guess.
So, I don't know if you heard, but the Thousand Year Door got a remake. Now, I think it's safe to assume we've all played it by now, and it's good. Great, even. It's the same old The Thousand Year Door you all love, now in HD, with a brand new soundtrack, some extra content, and they've even somewhat fixed my biggest complaint with the original, that being all the mandatory backtracking. Yeah, it sucks this remake is only 30 frames per second, while the original was 60, but with this being a turn-based RPG, I personally don't feel like that negatively affects things too much. It just means you have to relearn the action command timings, I guess. So, yeah, remake's good, but I'm just gonna come out and say it. What the fuck is going on here? So, remember that infamous Origami King interview? Yeah, that's the one. So that came out just 3 years before this remake's announcement, and in it, Nintendo gave absolutely no hints that a remake like this was even in consideration. It was the exact opposite, actually, with them basically saying there's no going back now. And you have to keep in mind, video games, even remakes, take a long time to make. So I feel like this HD version of the Thousand Year Door would have been at least discussed internally prior to this interview coming out. So why put out this messaging that you apparently can't do exactly the same thing that's been done before when you're planning to do just that? I honestly have no idea. Maybe this was a direct response to the reception that interview got, and Nintendo was able to put together this remake fairly quickly, which would be pretty goddamn impressive considering it was seemingly developed during the pandemic, which considerably slowed down development times industry-wide. And not to mention the fact that this game was apparently just sitting around fully finished for a full year prior to its launch. But who cares, right? The remake's here, and it's good, and all the headlines are good too, so all's well that ends well, right? Paper Mario is actually back now. This means we're finally getting the Thousand Year Door 2, right? Well, maybe. But I honestly think it's way too soon to say for sure. You see, while, yeah, all these headlines going around that the Thousand Year Door remake outsold the original GameCube version is a fun headline to throw around, When you dig deeper, based on the sales figures we currently have, it's not as impressive as it first seems. This information comes from Nintendo's first quarter financial reports for their 2025 fiscal year. And when you look at the numbers, wow, yeah, this remake definitely outsold the original. Cool. But with context, and when you extend the graph to include the entire franchise, well then it becomes a bit of a different story. Remember, the original was a GameCube game, and the GameCube is famous for being one of Nintendo's biggest failures. Before the Wii U hit the scene, the GameCube had the lowest install base of any of Nintendo's home consoles. So with that context, the fact that this remake, which is on a platform with a much higher install base than the GameCube, managed to only just barely outsell the original, yeah, it isn't actually that impressive. Then, if you look at the sales history for the entire franchise, well, then things start to look a bit worse. This remake didn't even come close to outselling the Origami King or Sticker Star. You know, the one that fans keep saying is apparently one of the worst games of all time. Now, if you're a company like Nintendo, which at the end of the day sole purpose is to make as much money as possible, well then what are you taking away from a graph like this? Now, to be fair, this information only really accounts for the remake's first quarter. All of these other games have had years, if not decades, to build up these numbers. But as you can also see in this graph, a majority of a game's sales tend to come in its first quarter. Well, unless you're Super Paper Mario, I guess. Which unfortunately leads me to believe that we won't see much more sales for this game in the future. Especially considering it's a game that released in the Switch's twilight years. The unfortunate reality is, a remake of an old GameCube game isn't going to turn many more heads with the Switch's successor just over the horizon. But, you know what, Nintendo's a smart company, and I like to think they'd recognize this, and yeah, with the context of when this remake was released, the sales actually aren't too bad. They even outright say in the investor report that sales are solid. So yeah, despite this remake not currently being on track to outsell Sticker Star or the Origami King, the optimist in me is saying this is still a pretty good sign for things to come. But at this point, as for what this all means for the future of Paper Mario, only time will tell.